So, welcome everybody. This is Israel Connection, a series that the Westchester Jewish Council has done for about 5 years now since the pandemic. And I just want to say a couple of words about the council. We are the umbrella organization for 125 nonprofit or Jewish organizations, synagogues, and schools, which serve the county and the residents of the county. And what we do a lot of things, but generally what we do is we connect with and we convene the Jewish community, the interfaith community here in the county, and the local electeds in the county. And American Zionist Movement, AZM, is a member of the council. And our presenter today is Avishai Infeld from AZM. And I'm going to send it over to Avishai. Oh, wait, sorry. I just want to, of course, say a few things about Avishai. He is the U.S. Zionist Election Coordinator at AZM. He's pretty much a local, originally from New Jersey, and he's been very involved in the Jewish and pro-Israel community throughout his life. He got a degree at McGill, a degree in political science, and now let's all say hello to Avishai.
Thank you so much, and so nice to be here with all of you talking about the World Zionist Congress election. I'll say a little bit about what AZM does. Very nice introduction. That was really very nice, but I'll say a little bit about what I do, who I am, what I do in my role, and then I'll get to the election itself and the Congress. So AZM, American Zionist Movement, is essentially a convening body, an umbrella organization of Zionist movements from across the United States. So we have 46 member organizations span the entire spectrum, left to right, reform, conservative, orthodox, various more kind of like identity-based organizations. All sorts of different things, and we're the umbrella, so we play a unique role in actually bringing them all together and convening them, and that work happens throughout the year, but once every 5 years we administer the U.S. election for the World Zionist Congress, which is probably the biggest project that we take on overall, and that's the entirety of my role. My title is U.S. Zionist Election Coordinator, which I like to joke is unfortunately a bit of a conspiratorial sounding title. If you don't really know what it is, it doesn't sound too good. um, but my job is really it's all about overseeing the entirety of the election in all aspects of it, from helping the candidates who are running, working with all of the slates, which I'll get to a bit later. We have 22 slates that ran. Helping a lot of the individual voters as they had issues. We have an election company that handles the more technical side of the election, so working with them to make sure that everything is operating properly. The PR promotions, I traveled around to a number of different cities and events, conferences, whatnot over the past 6-7 months or so to promote the election and raise awareness about it. And now that the election is wrapped up, moving on to the Congress preparations, I actually just got off a call literally 5 minutes ago with our 9 new slates to help them prepare for the Congress, which will meet in October, and go over all the logistics and everything, because it's very complicated and we have a lot of new people, which is really great. So I'll start my presentation. This is can everyone see me still? I don't see anyone, that's why. Okay.
See you.
Perfect. So this is a picture of the first Zionist Congress, which met in 1897, if I'm correct, in Basel, Switzerland, convened by Theodor Herzl, of course. He was the founder of modern Zionism. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the whole history of the Zionist movement now, but and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with it already, if not all of you, but obviously a very long and interesting history there. And
So
this was,
we're not seeing your
oh, you're
share.
not, sorry. Hold on. Can you see now?
Yes,
Perfect.
not in presentation mode, but we see there we go.
You can see it now it's in presentation mode.
Yep.
Okay, great. So this was, as I was saying, the first Zionist Congress, and since Israel was founded in 1948, the Congress has continued in a bit of a different role, but it is regularized now. So it meets in full every 5 years in Israel, and then there's smaller meetings in between between those 5 year meetings to ensure everything is running and make smaller decisions. The Congress has 525 representatives. Approximately 1/3 of them come from Israel. They represent Israel, and that is determined by the composition of the Knesset, of the Zionist parties in the Knesset. So basically, every party in the Knesset, except for the Arab parties and the Haredi parties, because they don't call themselves Zionist, have representation at the Congress. And the number of delegates that they get is determined by how they did in the last election. So most Israelis don't know this, but when they go to vote for the Knesset, they're also voting for their representatives at the Congress. Approximately another third are from all over the world. So there's about 30, I want to say, Zionist federations in different countries around the world. Historically, most of them have just determined internally how they'll allocate their delegates, generally based on the membership number. So the more members that each has in a given country, the more delegates they'll receive. But this year, for the first time in many countries, there are elections happening. So in Canada, United Kingdom, France, I believe, Ukraine, India, even Argentina, Brazil, Mexico. These are all Australia, New Zealand. Many of these are for the first time ever, first time in many years, holding elections, which is really exciting. I think it's a reflection of the increased attention globally, of course, on Zionism in Israel, which in many ways, unfortunately, for not great reasons, but I think we're harnessing that for something good here. And then there's the United States, which also has about a third of the delegates. So we have 152 delegates who go to the Congress representing us. The US has had elections for many, many years, for decades. So the primary function of the Congress really is to oversee and coordinate the operations and the leadership of the Zionist national institutions, which are the Jewish Agency, or Jaffe as it's written here, Karen Kayemet Yisrael, the JNF, Karen HaYesod, and the World Zionist Organization. And as you can see, 100% of the board of JNF is determined by the Congress, 50% of the Jewish Agency's board, 50% of the Karen HaYesod, and then the WZO has many different departments with a lot of resources and important responsibilities in terms of helping Jews around the world. And each of those department heads is also determined by the Congress and determined by who gets however many seats. And also an important note on JNF, which a lot of people don't realize, is that JNF in the United States is actually an entirely different entity from the JNF we're talking about here. So the blue boxes and everything, that's actually not the same JNF, same origins, of course, but this is Kakal, Karen Kayemet Yisrael, Jewish National Fund in Israel, which controls 13% of the land of Israel and does a tremendous amount of projects, infrastructure, land development, so on, and they are distinct from JNF in the United States. I'm not going to get into all this, but this is just more it's complicated, but of the structure of the WZO. And this is a little bit more, as I was saying, on on what the votes really go for and what they count towards. And through these national institutions, over $1 billion a year is distributed. And that's kind of the big number that's used to get people's attention often, is that you're indirectly contributing by voting to how over $1 billion a year is distributed, and that goes through these four institutions. And then here you can actually see a more complete breakdown of the results of the delegates and where they come from. So I'll explain a little bit of the slates now as well, and who some of them are. So as I said, we had 22 slates that ran in our election. Or sorry, 22 slates. It's a bit complicated because there was a kind of a blank spot there. And these really represent the vast spectrum within the Zionist movement. So, and the ranking, I should say, is completely randomized. It was literally chosen out of the hat. So to give no certainly any sort of preference when it came to the voting. But these really represent a huge range. So you have, just as a few examples, Shas represents the more orthodox Sfaradim, and obviously there's the Reform movement, and there's OIC is kind of mainstream modern orthodoxy. Um, Merkaz is the conservative movement. Hatikva is the progressive slate. And there's really a tremendous variety. You can go to our website if you want to read about all of them, azm.org/elections, and you can see the full candidate lists and the platforms and everything that they stand for. But I would say broadly, there's a few different categories of slates. So there's more kind of religious-based slates that are based in the religious movements. And then there are slates that are more political, either more to the left or more to the right. And then there's other kind of niche slates. So there's two slates, for example, that represent the Israeli American community, Aid Coalition and Israeli American Council. There's two slates that represent the Russian-speaking community, Biyachad and American Forum for Israel. There are more ideological Cherut, for example. So there are all sorts of different niches and areas within the Zionist spectrum that are represented, and everyone can find something that appeals to them. Now I'll show you the results, and these are still preliminary results, so everything is still to be finalized within the next few weeks, but this gives you a very good idea still. There won't be so much change probably. So the reform movement got the most votes, which is what's happened over the past few elections. They've maintained that top spot. Yisrael Chai was a new slate that came second. That was definitely a surprise to a lot of people. They weren't necessarily so well known. This was their first time competing in the election, and they came in second place. Eretz HaKodesh, Haredi slate, came in third place. Merkaz, the conservative movements, really held their own, I would say, in because a lot of the slates, they may have gotten more votes, but it didn't necessarily, when you look at ratios and various things, it wasn't necessarily percentage-wise more compared to the last election. But I think Merkaz actually improved a little bit. And you can see there's just a huge range in how many votes they also got. Overall, there were 230,000 votes. So almost a doubling from the last election, and also seen from the previous election 10 years ago, two elections ago, there were just over 50,000 votes. And then in the last election 5 years ago, there were about 123,000 votes. And in this election, we had about 230,000 votes. So interest is growing exponentially every single time. And our goal is to have as many American Jews as possible vote in this election. So we're very pleased with the growing participation in this. And the more people that vote, I think the more powerful, the stronger our voice as American Jews is at the Congress, because it shows just how much we care. If you have 50,000 voters or you have 230,000 voters, that shows that you care a lot more about this to the rest of the Jewish world who is present at the Congress, which will meet in October in Jerusalem. And one observation in particular that I made about the results, and it's very interesting, is I think that the slates that did the best are really the ones who reached out to the most people personally and had the most one-on-one interaction with potential voters. So there were some slates, for example, that had large social media presence. They had some big influencers, people with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of followers on social media who were promoting them and encouraging their followers to vote for the slate that they were a part of. But that didn't necessarily translate into votes in many cases. Whereas the slates that did really well are the ones that I would say had a strong ground game. They had a really wide network with a lot of the more religious movement-based slates, like the Reform movement, conservative movement, Mizrahi. They had people coordinating each synagogue. So they had the people at the central, the top of the movement, and then every single synagogue would have some sort of election coordinator, and they were responsible for bringing out the vote. I'm sure many of you probably heard from people at your in your individual shuls from who were representing that slate. So they did a really great job with that. Yisrael Chai is another example. People were surprised when they saw the result, but I think that if you look at the strategy, there was a lot of use of people reaching out one-on-one. And what I heard overwhelmingly from a lot of people throughout and after the election was they heard about this so much more than they ever had in the past. So 5 years ago, maybe they saw something on social media, they heard from one or two people. But in this election, within the first few weeks of voting, it was a 2-month long period. Within the first few weeks, they had people from 5, 6 different slates reaching out to them. And so that's why that personalized touch really made the difference, in my opinion, for a lot of these slates. We should I'll say also a little about Westchester. In particular, I did a little bit of research before this, and I found that there were about 4,400 voters approximately in Westchester. So I think good showing there. And and yeah, I'm obviously a tremendous Jewish community there, so I'm sure that there was a lot of promotion throughout Westchester on this. And but yeah, as you can see with these results, really huge differences, and also interesting to compare to the last election as well to see who did better, who did worse, where slates gained, and where slates lost. So I see I received a few questions. I'm gonna stop sharing and open up the chat. I didn't. I thought I got on questions, and I see it was just one other message. So happy to open it up to questions at this point if anyone has.
So I have a question about the Am Yisrael Chai party, since you said it was new. So it seems rather surprising that they would, have a second place showing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that party? And I guess another question also, there was like a celebrity slate, and I don't remember which party it was, but with Lizzie's, Savetsky and people like that. If you could tell us a little bit about what happened with that with that slate.
Yeah, for sure. So Am Yisrael Chai, look, I think ultimately what it came down to with them was it was the outreach. They they affiliated themselves with a lot of organizations that work on campuses with students, with college students, and with young adult focused organizations. And then within those, and I don't want to speak entirely for their strategy because I'm the nonpartisan administrator, but I think it's fair for me to say this that they within these two types of organizations, in particular, the young adult focused ones and the campus organizations, they recruited ambassadors, so to say, and all of those ambassadors were then responsible for bringing out all of their friends to vote. So you multiply that by however many across the country, it was really a very, very large amount in the hundreds or the thousands. And that's you see a result like that because if you have five people if you're a student and you're involved with many different organizations or even if you're on the mailing list, you're on their texting list, whatever it is, even if you're not super involved, a lot of people are getting emails from all sorts of different organizations now. So let's say the five that they're involved with, they're all sending them messages, but only one of them is someone that you actually know personally, is your friend maybe who sends you a message, and that was from that slate from Am Yisrael Chai, as I think was the case with a lot of people. Then you're going to vote for them. It's the personalization. So that's a big factor. There were two slates I would say that kind of utilized more than others people with large public followings. One was Eish Ha'am and one was Kol Yisrael. Both placed pretty high profile people near the tops of their lists, as opposed to more internal leaders. So a lot of slates will place their if it's a Jewish organization, they'll place their professional and their lay leadership on the top of the list, or they'll place their large donors at the top, people who are important to them in some way. But these two slates, in addition to doing that, they place people with large followings. And I think that what this showed ultimately was that that's not enough. You know, you can see something online, but this is something that needs buy-in. So it's a $5 fee to vote. And the one of the reasons we have it is because we want you to be bought in. It's not something that you just, 10, 30 seconds, you click on something and you move on with your day. We want all the people to feel they're part of the movement. It goes back to their actually the original World Zionist Congress with what Herzl called the Zionist shekel. Everyone has a part in it. So I think that again, when you feel that part of it, when someone that you know or someone you're connected to reaches out to you, maybe you'll feel bought in. But if it's just someone that you happen to see scrolling through your Instagram feed or Facebook, it doesn't have the same effect, even if you like them a lot. I'll also add though, in terms of the ordering of candidates, these kind of high profile people were placed very highly. There are also certain rules that all the slates have to follow. So 40% of the candidates have to be women and they have to be placed at certain places. So it's in 2 out of every 5 candidates in the ordering has to be a woman, and 25% have to be, and again, certain ordered in a certain way so that they're not all at the bottom. 25% of the candidates have to be age 35 or younger. So it's really it's kind of forced diversity in a sense, and I think a good way because it means that you're not just getting one demographic at the top of the list and one demographic who will be elected.
Avishai, am I interrupting you or?
No, no,
So there might be a problem sending questions to you, but I am getting questions.
great.
So I just want everybody to know that they should chat with me, and they should be able to get through to me because other people are. So one question I got was from Sam. Where does the 1 billion of funding come from, and what is it used for?
So first of all, it's I think it's important to talk about the 1 billion because I think there's a bit of a misconception sometimes. People just hear the 1 billion number and that's all they think about. And they think they're gonna this doesn't apply to everyone, but just the sense I get, they hear a billion and they think, all right, they're gonna get elected to the Congress, they're gonna go to the Congress in October and they're gonna walk out with $50 million check the next day. And that's not quite how it works. So a lot of that, I think most of that 1 billion comes through the JNF. They own 13% of Israel's land, which generates an incredible amount of income for them. So that's where most of that money comes from. And it goes towards a huge variety of different causes and needs. It all goes through those national institutions, the JNF, the Jewish Agency, the World Zionist Organization, and Karnei Yesod, but a massive amount of things. So the Jewish Agency, for example, they're responsible for all of the shlichim, the Israeli emissaries, to camps, to Jewish schools, to hillels, to synagogues, communities, in all sorts of other ways. And where the money that is going to support those shlichim, the emissaries, what kind of communities that will go to, that is dependent perhaps on who's elected to the Congress, or what types of communities in the diaspora, depending where they might fall on the religious spectrum, let's say, or all sorts of different where they might fall. Again, how much money they could be getting for different programs they that they that they want to run could be dependent on how many people that are aligned with those values get elected. The JNF, for example, they hold a lot of land, so there are contentious areas, let's say, that they within Israel or within the broader area. An example that's often given is the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Some would say that, are they going to build up projects there? Are they gonna do work in that area, or are they not going to? And that can and there's a lot of money associated with those projects and the land that they might be holding and the decisions to hold that land or not to hold that land. And that's very dependent on who gets power in the Congress and how much power and how many votes each each slate receives. And then in turn, it's not just the slates, but it's also the factions, because you have broadly the left and the right and the center. So the slates are not operating on their own in the Congress, but work together with their similarly minded partners.
Okay, I have a question from Linda. She's asking, what happened to the votes that were fraudulently obtained in the Orthodox slates?
Um, so any fraudulent votes, regardless of what slate they may have um been received by, were disqualified. So
You
we
want to give
we
a little background about this? I don't know if other people know.
for sure. So there were just under 19,000 fraudulent votes that we discovered and had to disqualify, which were received by 6 different slates. And unfortunate that that became one of the stories of the Congress, I would say, because it's not reflective of the fact that we did have this really great record turnout. Um, but there were these 19,000 approximately fraudulent votes which were disqualified. Everyone in our election committee and everyone who reviewed them saw that they were very clearly, for a variety of reasons, fraudulent, and those were thrown out, and we did not include them in the final count of votes.
Okay, a question from Larry. Who made the rules governing the slates? Was it a contentious discussion?
So all of the rules and regulations, the dates, everything for the U.S. election for the Congress are determined by the what's called the Area Election Committee. Every country that runs an election has within their Zionist Federation Area Election Committee. Every slate that was elected in the previous election has 2 representatives on the committee, but their voting power is determined by the number of votes that they received in the last election. So, for example, the Reform Movement, just as in this election and the last election, they also received the most votes. So even though they have the same number of representatives as a much smaller slate, those 2 people have a lot more, their vote carries a more weight in that committee, and the members of that committee determine all aspects of the rules and dates and everything election, basically.
Benjamin has a question about when will the results be finalized, and will Israel High be penalized for campaign rules violations, which you could tell us about that, and what will be done 5 years from now to enforce the campaigning rules, in real time.
Yeah. So the campaign rules are I would say enforced throughout the election. We have a complaint process which was very much utilized throughout the election by slates that saw another slate, or they thought they saw another slate that was violating the rules. Those were all referred to the election chairs, who are 2 independent, impartial volunteers that lead the election committee. They decide on how to deal with any sort of campaign rules violations, and then if a slate is unhappy with the ruling, there's a means to appeal it, so that we have an election tribunal, which is almost like the court of AZM, and each slate has a representative on that tribunal. So they'll make a decision on any sort of violations if they're not happy with the original ruling, and it can go all the way up. We have it's called the Zionist Supreme Court, and those sanctions or penalties will make their way, if needed, through that, basically the judicial system of the World Zionist Congress system. As for individual slates, we'll see what happens. Things are still very much playing out, and there's a lot to be seen still, because there was a lot that happened in the election, and so there could easily be penalties that are still levied on certain slates, and a lot can change in the coming weeks. But we should definitely see final results in the next few weeks, and the election has to be certified by the end of this month.
And when will the results be finalized?
So we already, as I showed you, we have the preliminary results, which I think are a pretty good indicator. I don't have an exact date as to when the final results will come out, especially because there are still cases and issues that are working their way through the various channels within our system. But the election must be certified by the end of July.
Oh, okay. Moshe has a question about Dorsey Torah. Did they win any seats? And he says that he heard that votes from one party were disqualified, for having too many votes paid by the same credit card. I think we covered some of that already. But can you tell us about Dorsey Torah?
Yeah, so Dorsey Torah V'Tzion is, I think they would characterize themselves as an open Orthodox party. They're associated with Yeshiva Chovei Torah, Maharat, and so they represent, I would say, the religious left within Orthodoxy. They did win, I believe, 1 or 2 seats. Again, everything is pending finalization, but I think they will end up being 1 or 2 seats to Dorsey Torah V'Tzion, and they will definitely have representation of the Congress.
Could you talk about the issue Michael read about relating to Merkaz posting problematic flyers in the name of the Haredim, and what special penalty is imposed on that type of situation?
Yes, so there was a, I'm trying to think what exactly I can say, but there there was a situation in which someone who's associated with Merkaz, not a someone who works for Merkaz in the United States, but the someone who's associated with the global Merkaz, um, paid for flyers to be put up in more Haredi areas in Israel, encouraging them, I would say, not to vote. It was a campaign strategy, I guess, but that was ultimately not they were it was not looked upon favorably. We don't, and it is a rule in the election that you cannot campaign in a way that demeans another slate. So what we really are looking for is a positive election, and we want everyone to promote themselves and make the case for why American Jews should vote for their slate, but we want that to stay positive, and it shouldn't result to it shouldn't end up with slates trying to knock other slates in ways that are not that are negative.
Okay, any other questions? Please send them to me. And I see Herbert Block, the executive director of AZM, is here, and I'd like him to say hello. You can meet him. Pam, you can spotlight him. There you go. I hope I didn't surprise you.
No, I'm just shoving nachas with Avi presentation. And I know I spoke to some of you early on when we were beginning this process, so happy to, as a White Plains resident, have us share this information with you. And kol kavod to Avishai for his work on the election as part of our team.
Okay, and do you want to just introduce yourself to those who don't know you?
Sure. I live in White Plains, as relevant for this body, but I'm executive director of AZM. I've been in that role for 8 years, and I think you probably introduced AZM as the umbrella body of the Zionist organizations, the Zionist Federation in the United States that oversees the elections. So I know some of the people on screen here, and thank you for this opportunity, Helene and the team, to as we explained it at the beginning when we were beginning the process, and WJC helped get the word out. And now thank you for this opportunity. I think 5 years ago I remember doing a Zoom briefing from Israel when the Congress was happening, and we can do the same in the fall, and I'm sure there'll be some delegates from different slates from Westchester attending, so we can come back and do something about the actual Congress live from Israel, or right after.
Actually, I mentioned that we started the Israel Connection series 5 years ago, and I think yours was the first one, taking us to the Congress. One question for the two of you is, so you had this, very, large amount of votes coming in. Was it something that you expected? Do you expect that number to hold up the next time, or do you think this was just a one-off because maybe there's been a lot of attention on Israel because of October 7th and everything, else going on?
I think that it's both. I think that if you look at the trends from the past few elections, participation has been going up tremendously. So we're basically doubling it every time. And I think that now all the more so, there's a lot of interest in the election, partially as a consequence of the greater interest in everything Israel Zionism related within our community. But it's not something that I don't see the election participation diminishing in the future. I think, especially with the fact that we now have 22 slates who participate in this election, 9 new slates who are presumably here to stay, that that we'll see this type of level. If not, I mean, I'm sure it will be even greater actually next time. And also part of that is that some of these slates are tapping into new communities that weren't involved before. So yes, some of the new slates, I'm sure, took away votes from other slates that would have gotten from certain people, but there's a lot of other communities with I think a great example is the Israeli American community, who in many ways is more involved in the Jewish community now than they've ever been before. And with our new Israeli American slates, they have a lot of potential in terms of really getting votes from this community, which is more engaged than ever before.
I have another question that came in, so since we have some time, Susanna is asking about Am Yisrael Chai. I know we spoke about it earlier on. Perhaps Susanna came in a little bit later. Can you just talk a little bit about Am Yisrael Chai? It was a new slate that came in, right? So if you could just, summarize what we had spoken earlier about, or maybe Herbert could add something to it.
Right. So Am Yisrael Chai is associated with a lot of Kiruv Jewish outreach organizations across the United States, mostly focusing on college students and young adults. That's really their base, and that's reflected in their candidate list. And I think a lot of their voters as well. They really galvanized them to vote through a lot of their existing networks on campuses. Herbert, did you have anything?
Are you able to see where the votes are coming from in the US? Like 50% of Am Yisrael Chai's votes, came from the New York area. Are you able to see the demographics on which places are voting for which slates?
Yeah, we don't have all that data yet. We'll have it soon, to see precisely where all the votes are coming from. But we do know already where our voters live, and I don't know yet where all of the different slates are getting the most votes. I mean, I could take some educated guesses based on, who I know everyone's demographics are, but we do have very broad participation from across the country. And of course, there's places you would expect a lot more of than others. New York has a tremendous amount of voters, Florida, California, the places with the largest Jewish communities. But
do you
we
know
do have voters from across all 50
who they're
states.
voting? Yeah.
Sorry, what was the?
You were saying most, you can see the number of votes, but you can also see which slates that they're voting for in Florida, for instance.
Yes, we will. We haven't released anything on that yet.
Mhm.
But we will have that information. But I think it really is already it's been interesting for us to see just where the voters are based, and like I said, across all 50 states. We have voters in Puerto Rico as well, some of the other territories. So the word really reached every corner of the country, and Jews, even in places that don't have strong communities by any sense, and people who are living in areas that don't have much of a community at all, they heard about this election and they voted. So once again, I think when we go to the Congress in October, that's something else that really strengthens us, that we can say this isn't even just the New York Jews, this isn't just the Los Angeles Jews who are represented here, but this is really the full breadth of the American Jewish community that wants its voice at the Congress.
It's interesting. Okay, one more question. Bob has a question. Oh, it's okay. I will read it to you. Did AZM consider itself? Actually, I think I'm going to, it's a complicated question. I think I'm probably going to unmute Bob and let him ask that question himself. So hold on.
Hi, thanks for this great presentation.
Okay, go ahead, Bob.
I'm thinking about making it easy for people to come before they cast their vote, to understand how different slates, positions, and plans and objectives align with their own. And what I didn't see is some kind of visual aid, like a fold-out brochure where there were columns around classes of issues, and each row had a slate. And if they had published something, you would have like the key phrase. So,
Right.
A, have you ever done that? And I just didn't see it. Did you expect the Jewish journalists to do it? Did you think it didn't matter? Because if nobody in my community was advocating for a certain slate and they didn't send me email or paper mail, then I just wouldn't think about them.
So we put together a slate booklet. Every slate was given the opportunity and took advantage of the opportunity to send us 2 pages that could be designed however they wanted to. One page with their platform and one page with their candidate list and their endorsers. Because some slates also had other organizations endorsing them. And we put that on our website. We put that on the voting website right beneath the button to vote. There was a link to see all of the slates and their descriptions that they submitted, because it's complicated for us to really speak on behalf of any of the slates. They don't want us to start speaking for them, and that's not good because we need to stay entirely independent and impartial. But all of the slates were had a visual guide to what they stand for and why you should vote for them. I can put the link in the chat to that book if you're interested.
I didn't read the book. I'm just thinking about 5 years from now, you're trying to get more younger people to participate, and younger people on average process more audio, photos, and videos than written text. So I'm just seeding for you to think about. Maybe you're going to have each thing make a 25-second audio and you're going to string them all together. And I'm going to be able to go to YouTube, 5 weeks before the election or anytime thereafter and watch it. That wouldn't work for me. I'd go download your book,
Right.
PDF, if I knew that it was there, but I didn't know that it was there.
And that's a great idea, and we certainly take any of your recommendations, and please feel free to contact us with anything that you think we can do better for the next election, because we're always looking to improve. So please let us know. And there were also organizations that did things similar for slates that they were supporting, or they wanted to help get the word out. For example, a Wider Bridge Jewish LGBT organization, they collected clips from candidates from across the slates who were also members of their organization to talk about them. I think there's a few other organizations, and we also we got a lot of coverage in local media. So again, I know, I mean, I'm a younger person myself. I know most people my age are not reading their local Jewish newspaper, but we were able to place articles in a lot of local newspapers and focused in those articles on the local candidates from across the slates.
Thanks.
Okay, 2 last questions from Moshe. He'd like to know, I mean, we spoke a bit about that, in the US, there were many different geographic areas participating. Is there some place where you have the numbers for that? How much percentage came from each state? And also, he'd like to know if Chabad is represented in the election at all.
Yeah, so I don't have all the exact, we have that data, and we'll have more complete data eventually on breakdowns by state, zip code, city, so on. I don't have all that at my fingertips to see exactly where everyone voted. But I do know there was representation from all 50 states, from all sorts of communities across the country. And even I think we had candidates we had 2,900 candidates approximately, and I want to say that we had from the majority of states not all 50, but I think the majority of states had at least a few, if not many more candidates. Chabad doesn't have any sort of official participation in the election. It was kind of up to the individual Chabad rabbis if they wanted to promote it within their communities and how they wanted to go about that. But there were numerous Chabad rabbis who ran with different slates, and I know we did have a lot of participation from within the Chabad community.
Okay, great. Well, this was wonderful. A lot to think about. I'm going to send a follow-up email to everybody who registered, and they will get a recording. And Avishai, if I could, if you can give me, if you want a separate email address, or if you want your regular email address to be shared, if anybody has questions, they can, if they'd like to follow up with you, we would appreciate it.
You can feel free to share my email address with everyone.
Okay, so I'll do that. I'll send it out with the recording. And, we really appreciate you coming on and explaining this a bit of a complicated process. There's been a lot more interest in it. So I'm glad that we were able to bring it to the community. And I just want to say one more thing about the council. We have our Jewish Music and Arts Festival coming up on August 17th at the Kensico Dam from 12 to 6. And you can go on our website, www.wjcouncil.org, if you want to see who the vendors are, who the musicians are, and find out more about the festival. And that's it. So thank you everybody for coming, and have a good day. Enjoy the weather. Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you.